Later on today's On the Other Hand episode.
We have to get away from this toxic thinking that says the people that aren't like me are my enemy. Exactly wrong. No, if we want Arkansas to do better, we have to build a bigger table. We have to have more people.
This is On the Other Hand, a podcast sponsored by Braver Angels Arkansas, where hope and common ground meet.
Each episode features community leaders from Arkansas and beyond, sharing stories and insights on how together we can strengthen both our relationships and our communities.
Hello, and welcome to On the Other Hand. I'm your host, Glenn White, here with my guest co-host, John O'Brien. On our podcast, we interview community leaders in Arkansas who help work towards solutions or who reach across divisions within our community. So today we have the distinct pleasure of talking with Dr. Kevin Heifner. Kevin is a nephrologist. He's practiced medicine for 35 years. The last 25 as a kidney specialist at Baptist Hospital in Little Rock. He graduated from the University of Tennessee College of Medicine in 1992 with a residency in internal medicine and a fellowship at the University of Alabama Medical Center in Birmingham. Kevin's family is actually from a small town in northwest Louisiana, where his father initially was a minister and his mother a school teacher before the family then moved to Nashville, Tennessee. His father continued in religious education for 20 years, then became a philosophy and anthropology professor, interestingly, while his mother has continued to sell Avon for 48 years. Kevin's areas of interest include working within progressive faith-based groups on issues where faith, politics, and public policy intersect. He has served as a board chairman for Good Faith Media, which is a national organization that seeks to facilitate better thinking and communication. Their goal is to help promote the common good for all people. They produce daily articles and analysis, short videos, full-length documentaries, and multiple podcast series. Kevin's contributions there include writing about tribalism, civil discourse, higher education, and stray dogs. For decades, Kevin has been interested in First Amendment issues and the importance of the separation of church and state at a public policy level. That will be interesting. Kevin has also worked with and supported the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty, which is a group based in Washington for the past 80 years. Their primary focus is advocating for separation of church and state in our government and public institutions. Kevin has become increasingly interested in and involved with the interfaith movement at a local and national level because he sees the importance of education and communication in helping to promote equal rights for people of all faiths, as well as protecting the rights of those with no religious heritage from unwanted intrusion. Kevin and his wife, Angie, live here near Little Rock. Angie has been active in the animal rescue community, especially fostering and finding forever homes for stray dogs in central Arkansas. Kevin enjoys music and art. His role in his community, and this is on me, Kevin, but I'm describing you as a sort of human Grand Central Station for connecting like-minded, community-oriented persons. So, with all of that said, Kevin, welcome to On the Other Hand.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, John. I appreciate being asked to be here. As we were talking just a minute ago, you can certainly tell the difference between people who get interviewed for a living and people like myself who basically never speak in front of a microphone or to groups of people. So I hope I may be able to share something from my experience that's of benefit to someone in some small way today. Glenn, let me ask you to do something. I thought about this. Can you you and I are friends outside of this? I mean, acquaintances and friends. And John, I don't know John, but explain kind of how we're friends. And because, when you called me, I said, Glenn, I don't have anything to say. I mean, I literally said, like, look, I'm a kidney doctor. I work at Baptist. I go to dialysis units in Stuttgart and Benton and Conway, but I just do this stuff for fun. So maybe explain to people, maybe that'll be a foray into where we can jump off and maybe talk about something.
Okay, Kevin, the way we first met, as I recall it, is that we were sitting in on a weekly series that our priest at St. Michael's Episcopal Church was talking about rethinking church. We have some, different ways of looking at it. We had a lot of really interesting conversations, some of them really out there. And so that's how I got to know you. And then it hadn't even been like a month, and you already managed to sucker me into starting and organizing a concert by a musician out of Nashville. And unfortunately, because of health issues with my mother at the time, I actually wasn't able to participate in it. But that's how we got started. Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, I actually had forgotten both those things. I was thinking that you would maybe talk about, I don't know, just going to the lake or braver angels, but I'm sure we'll get into some of that. But yeah, so we kind of go back unofficially as friends. But yeah, just yeah, whatever. Tell me what you want to know, and I'll do my best to
Okay,
say
sure.
something.
First, before we kind of dive into anything heavier, is there anything that we left out? That was a rather long introduction to you, but I think it was warranted. Is there anything else you would add about your life today, in the past, or what's currently most important to you? Anything at all?
No, I mean you hit the high points, and I think something a lot of people want to know is like you're a doctor, so why do you do this other stuff? I would say the things that are important to me to sort of set the ground rule right now, or just to set the where I am. I think we're in a really bad spot as a people, as a nation, as a society. And I don't think that's a partisan statement. I think most people would recognize that we have lost the ability to communicate well with each other, to talk to each other, to be human with each other, to recognize that we're all here, we're all humans, we all have strengths and weaknesses and frailties. But man, the first 50 years of my life, I'm 60. So, first 50 years of my life, I sort of had this vision of our country that is not what it has been the past decade. It is distinctly different. And I have two children, both in their mid 20s. And I want to leave them the first 50 years of my life, America. I want to do what I can because I feel like my generation has dropped the ball. So that's where I am. So anything I can do along those lines.
Okay, I understand that, and I appreciate that. Let me just ask this one question before I turn it over to John. I mean, you are a physician, as we've established. You're a Baptist layperson, but active in some respects. You're clearly a community voice and a leader, even though you may not see yourself that way. I think most people would see that as the case. So, given those various identities you hold, how do they inform each other and how you go about your daily life?
I don't separate that stuff. Part of it is the way I was brought up. I was brought up really traditionally in a traditional family, but the conversations we had, as you had alluded to my father, who was a kind of an interesting guy, theologian and educator and philosopher, PhD, and we just grew up thinking about things that I realize most people don't. And so I've always been interested in like what's happening outside my immediate realm. Medicine's boring. It's probably like that with any job on earth. I mean, I've done my job 35 years and it's very hard to find new things to throw in front of me where I go, oh, wow, that's interesting. Never saw that before. And so, as much as I enjoy medicine and enjoy helping people, I look for areas outside of medicine, hopefully, where I can make some small difference, but also where I can keep a part of my brain engaged that medicine does not engage.
That's fascinating. I've only used a kidney doctor twice, and they were life-saving. So thank you for that kind of work. Kevin, I do think that your background and current challenges are a real mixture of things. I like when Glenn referred to you as Grand Central Station of approaches. What drew you into community engagement? Just beyond medical practices, and how would you describe that role today, community engagement?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't think of myself in any official role as being a community anything. Usually the term we typically hear, and I'll talk about this in a second maybe, is community activist, right? Well, that ain't me. I'm just a guy that lives in Roland. And what I've discovered is my life is richer and fuller and better if I can plug into some things that are outside stuff I'm used to. That's why I like having friends in different groups of people that aren't like me, different background, different, they grew up somewhere different, different, whatever. It keeps life interesting, but I think it also makes life better and it makes life richer. I do think, going back to Glenn's question earlier, when he said, well, how do these different things inform your life? Okay, I'll give you an example. As a physician, you remember on MASH, the TV show? You guys are old enough, right? And you remember it was this thing, didn't matter who got shot up, that Hawkeye and BJ, they took care of those guys, right? You took care of any wounded. That's the medical ethos. And so that's the ethos I have practiced under for a number of years. I can't differentiate when you come to see me or I see you at Baptist or any hospital, whether you're black, white, agnostic, Christian, Muslim, gay, Jewish, straight, transgendered. None of that matters. And so when I look at the state of the world, I sure as hell see a lot of divisions being thrown up. I see a lot of walls. I see a lot of, we can't like those people. And that's something that's very antithetical to me as a physician.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. You really don't have a choice, nor do you want that choice. You just get the job done, right?
Yeah. I mean, you treat all comers, and I would like to think as a human, I hope my kids get this from me, that we love all comers, right? I mean, I treat all people. I don't really have an option to be mean spirited and ugly and cruel to anyone. I shouldn't.
As I've aged, I have realized how much alike I am with my father. I never thought that to be true in my teens and 20s and 30s, but as you age, you begin to see traits, practices. Tell me a little bit more. I understand your father moved from the Baptist preacher to being an anthropology professor. That's not just a leap across the canyon, that's a leap across the ocean. I get the sense he's been a key influence in your life. How did his journey shape how you think about faith or community or any other?
Yeah, and the word Baptist may have already been used as much as we need. My brand of Baptist is distinctly different than probably what most people listening would hear. But my dad was, before it became vogue, would talk about this is not a black and white world. The world is gray. That is the way I grew up thinking about everything, not right and wrong, but gradations, and we do the best we can. And, that bleeds over into how we view people. People aren't good and bad and evil, and we all are clay vessels. We all have our frailties, and we all stand in need of whatever, forgiveness and second and 15th chances. So I was really fortunate. Now, one thing I'll jump way ahead to say, my dad's 88 years old. My dad's had 3 careers, and I really, it's just neat. He didn't start teaching college till he was 57. So he's taught college for 30 years, and he still teaches college full time, which it's kept him involved mentally. He had his 88th birthday 2 weeks ago, so that's a good thing. But I'll say one other thing real quick about that. A lot of people say, oh yeah, my dad's my best friend. My dad's never been my best friend. My dad and I argue and talk and visit. Well, yeah, but it's beyond friendship. And so maybe I can be that for my kids one day.
Kevin, you've been a leader with Good Faith Media and the Baptist Center for Ethics. Tell us a bit about those 2 organizations and a role you may play in each of them.
Yeah, it's really one organization. And it's funny how you have these little moments in life and you don't realize sometimes that's really going to be a big moment. And so probably, I don't know, forever ago, like 23 years ago, I was going to be on a board for this group I really like. It's Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty. Again, they argue strictly for the complete separation of church and state. It's not what most people associate modern day Baptists with. Anyway, and It's an organization I've worked at. And my brother called and I said, yeah, I'm going to be on that board. And he goes, no, there's this other board. This guy wants you to be on his board. I've never heard of him. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I did it. I've worked with this group now for almost a quarter of a century. It's nuts. And it's become a really big part of my life. And the guy that founded this group, I don't really have a mentor, but he would be close. He was an ethicist named Robert Parham. And he said two things to me through the years I've never forgotten. And my mind goes back to them, and they're always useful. One was words matter. That's it. He was an excellent writer. He was an excellent thinker. He was laser sharp in his wit, and he did not waste nor mince words. So when I listen to politicians today, or I engage public discourse, or I read the newspaper, I read it through that lens. And it's really been helpful for me to go, oh, yeah, this guy thinks I'm in the market for Shinola. Nah, bruh, I ain't buying Shinola from you because I know what you're selling. In other words, it's made me very discretionary. The second thing that this guy told me through the years was, he said, I do not like conflict, but I am not afraid to have it. It's probably not an original statement to Robert, but I've thought about that a lot through the years. And I think in today's world, we could revisit that. Let me tell you two things real quickly. Just the group, basically, we do socio-political. We're not a devotional group. We're not selling a brand of religion. We're talking about the world we live in and how can we all be better people. Glenn, back to your question earlier, to promote the common good. The common good are those things that you would think most sentient, rational humans hunger after. Nobody wants to starve. We all want good schools for our children. You know, we want to live in peace. I mean, just the things that most everybody wants. But for a faith-based group, we did two things through the years I was real proud of. One is this: within hours of the bombing of the Twin Towers on 9/11, and I've looked, we were the first faith-based organization. In fact, I think we were the first organization anywhere on the planet that said, everybody take a deep breath. There is going to be a knee-jerk reaction that can come out of this, and it can be very ugly and damaging. Take a breath. Do not overreact. We tried to hold people to their better angels on that. And that statement at that moment in history took a great amount of courage by Robert Parham, who wrote that statement. That's what you call stepping out as a true leader. The second one was, you remember back in 2000, late 2019, early 2020, when COVID hit. You may not remember, but one of the first big pandemics of COVID actually occurred in Greers Ferry, Arkansas, an hour from here. Either 5 or 6 people that were at a small church up there, they had some kind of youth event or something, caught COVID, and 5 or 6 of them died. That was extremely early on, like in the first week or two. And our group came out at that time and said, hey, all you church people, there's this really bad illness that's out there, and we might want to get thoughtful about gathering in huge numbers. Now, that goes into a big argument for a lot of people. But I think that's something I've always been proud of as a physician, that we took a stand to say on that issue. So anyway, that's enough about that. It's been a neat association.
That's very helpful. It helps everyone get to know you better, as well as put a framework around things. I've heard you referred to as a, quote, progressive Baptist. And progressive seems to get thrown around a lot lately. I'm not even sure what it means to me. What does that mean in light of the countercultural identity of today?
I'm going to give you a very astute, thoughtful answer. I haven't a damn clue. And that's why I hate terms. I don't even really care that much about the Baptist term. I mean, I'll take it. I'm not sure half the people that know me would think I'm much of a Christian, but that's another story. But particularly when you come to words like, I tell you, it's poisonous thinking. It's what it is to me. Even the terms like, oh, I'm conservative and you're liberal. Oh, I'm progressive or I'm moderate or I'm this. They are simply descriptors. Frankly, I think they're descriptors that have been extremely well thought out in an evil strategy to figure out how to separate people into groups. I think about stuff like this a fair amount, and I think I could defend this on most of the big issues of the day. Most gun rights, women's reproductive rights, take your pick. About 70% of us are pretty much on the same page. And they will use whoever the powers are that be in whatever political thing, they use it to keep us at each other's throats. And we are killing ourselves. I don't see the utility of these sorts of terms. I would much rather say, let me tell you exactly how I feel about gun ownership. I have guns in my house. And then I can tell you that, John, and then we can have a discussion. And I bet what we're going to find out is we're pretty close. And anyway, I'm not a fan of, I don't know what to call myself anymore, right? Am I progressive, liberal, traditional? I'm not really Democrat. I'm not Republican. I don't know what the terms are.
I think it is oversimplification to put it down to a label. I know that in my work and studying the human brain, that the brain loves to draw a conclusion and stop thinking. It's just so much easier. And so we love our labels, but they are not descriptive of who we are. It's more like an insult that I can be brought down to 2 or 3 labels. Not me, and I agree with you very much.
Let me say something about terms, because this is the conversation I had an hour and a half ago with the guy who used to be a college provost at a big college, who I like. And we were talking about this, and I'll tell you at the end why I talked to him. And he said, Kevin, he said, you and I were both raised in the South. And I know, God, I've lived in Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, and Arkansas. And he's from Mississippi. Yeah, we're from the South. And he brought up, he said, isn't it amazing how much easier it is to hate someone when you put them in a category? And he used one, I'm not going to give it, we would all recognize it, but whenever you pick any group of humans and you add a pejorative to it, all of a sudden you have dehumanized them. It becomes much easier to take away their rights. He was in Vietnam, and his example there was when they told him that those Vietnamese peasants, you could call them an ugly name, it made them a lot easier to shoot bullets at. That's where sloppy language leads us. Remember, I told you, Robert Parham told me words matter? Here you go.
That's well said. Kevin, I was going to ask you because you've written about tribalism, and so that kind of fits really well into what you're talking about now, the tendency to group people by label or talk about them as the other side or something like that, and how that leads to dehumanizing or at least dismissing the seriousness and legitimacy of people. So I wonder if you have any thoughts about where you see that tendency toward tribalism and dehumanization playing out most dangerously right now, both in Arkansas and nationally.
Yeah, I see it everywhere. I don't think that's hard. So I can almost leave that. I think most of your listeners can figure that out. It was funny when you asked me that question, I realized I don't write much stuff. I usually write things when I get really irritated. I will write 1,500 words, and I'm not a writer. But because of my association with that group, and our stuff gets read pretty widely, I can, send it to them. And I did write something about tribalism, but let me tell you in a nutshell what I wrote. And this is going back to my dad, John. Dad said, he said, and I don't know, maybe he makes this up. He said, when the first people came here and you had a band of Indians or Native Americans that were living off of some river in upper state New York, and 10 miles down the river, there's another group of Indians, Native Americans on the other side. By the way, my dad teaches Native American philosophy, so if I'm getting my terms wrong, forgive me. But anyway, and he said, here's the damnedest thing. He said, it's human history. He said, you go ask the first group of natives, the indigenous people, and they say, who are you? And they say, we are the people, the Anasazi, right? This is who everybody identifies their group as the people. You let them be aware of the group 10 miles down the river on the other side, and they will say, oh, yeah, those are the not people. Those are the lesser than. Those are the somewhat like animals. I mean, good Lord, look at it in our own country today. Okay, not hard to see. What's amazing to me today is we don't even use, what's the word? It's not racial. We don't even use the ethnic differences as much anymore. Now we use differences like, I choose to love this person. I mean, they're not even biologic differences, really. Anyway, look across the world. Go look at every genocide within the past 50 years. Go look at the state of what's happening right now in what used to be called the Middle East, which had an appropriate name. It's now called Southeast Asia. As of today's news article in the Democrat Gazette, or Southwest Asia, because we just sent 150 Arkansans over there. They actually labeled it the right term. It's not the Middle East. But anyway, so the tribalization occurs everywhere. And isn't it amazing that nobody ever considers their group to be the out group? They always consider their group to be the human group. We just have to guard against that kind of thinking, I would say.
I think that the more perspectives you can appreciate, the better you can see that you might not be the center of the universe. I was brought up in Europe and the Middle East as a child, and so my perspective of American life and traditions and culture were viewed as a minority living in the streets of Tel Aviv, Israel. You do get that sense that maybe my life and my perspective isn't everything.
Yeah, it's shocking, huh? Yeah. Real quick, there's an old book I've got by a guy named Bennett Cerf, and there was an old editor. The three of us are old enough to know him historically. H.L. Mencken, I think it was. Remember him? Used to be the editor of the New Yorker or something. And so his standard letter to reject someone who wanted to publish a story or who had a complaint against something that they had published was, "Dear sir or madam, you may be right. Sincerely, H.L. Mencken." And I try to use that because, it neither gives nor takes anything. It's just, I don't know. You might be right. I could be wrong. It's not even worth my time. Oh, here's my other joke on that one. I get to use my second joke. It's like my friend says, when you want to get into it with somebody or somebody wants to get into it with you, and you kind of think, I'm probably right on this. I've got a friend named Stan, and Stan goes, "A bulldog knows it can whip a skunk, but the bulldog knows it's not worth the fight." And sometimes, maybe as you say, we get older, we just kind of pick our battles a little bit. So
that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I love it. All right. Well, listen, you're talking about all the othering that happens. As you know, our podcast is sponsored by Braver Angels Arkansas. And one of the key things we try to do in that group is to help people engage constructively across political differences. So given that kind of effort, and when there are lots of other groups doing things like that, when you hear those types of efforts being undertaken to bring people together and to engage appropriately, how does that resonate with you, and given your own experience about how relationships across differences can work?
Man, it resonates hugely. And here's where I'm going to make the banana split that you guys promised me for coming on your podcast. I really like Braver Angels. Like it a lot. I don't do everything with y'all. I'm involved with a couple other groups, but I have been to, as you know, Glenn, I've been to multiple of your presentations. I have found it to be exceedingly helpful in in fostering how we can discuss things, sometimes contentious things, with people who we are not necessarily going to agree. And Glenn, I've asked you several times that little acronym that you do, the LAP, and I jotted it down to make sure it's easy and it's simple, but it's helpful. LAPP. You listen to understand. At the end, when we get to wind up, a very smart friend of mine from Locust Fork, Alabama, I asked him, I said, what can we do in today's world to make it better? How do we? And he goes, maybe we need to listen more and talk less. That's putting it down there where the goats can get at it. That ain't hard stuff. Listen more. You got 2 ears. Talk less. You got 1 mouth. But listen, acknowledge, pivot. May I now share my perspective? And then when we share, we talk to people not to change them, not to convince them, but to say, this is the way I see it. And then hopefully, maybe, is there a little bit of common ground? Because again, I'm going to go back to, not to get into the politics of it, but you can pick the most contentious issues in our society. And I think within 5 or 10 minutes, I can show you that most people are really not that far apart on those issues. And yet we're killing each other over this stuff, man. It is not healthy. So thank you for the work that Braver Angels does. And I would encourage anybody that can make y'all's symposia in person or online to do it. It's worthwhile.
Thank you, Kevin.
Well, that's it for part 1 of our conversation with Kevin Heifner. We'll pick things up right where we left off in the next episode, so be sure to join us for part 2.
If you liked what you heard today, share the episode with a friend and help us spread stories of bridge building across Arkansas. And remember, On the Other Hand offers dozens of other interviews just like this one. You can find On the Other Hand in your favorite podcast app or on the podcast page of the Braver Angels Arkansas website at arkansas.braverangels.org.
On the Other Hand is sponsored by Braver Angels in Arkansas. Music was composed by Randall Standridge of Jonesboro, Arkansas, and was performed by the University of Northern Colorado Symphonic Band, Dr. Richard Main, conductor.
From your host, Glenn White
and John O'Brien.
Join us in working to make our relationships and communities better.